Good afternoon, everybody. Thursday, live training with yours truly, Matthew Pitts. We have been moving through this book at, some would call it a pace, but regardless, we're covering principles that I believe govern human condition. And it's getting to the point now where we're really being able to assimilate all the things we've learned in the past are really starting to come together. It feels kind of like algebra, right? Like, you got to have one before you have two. So it really feels like that. I definitely want to do, I thought last week's training was good in that I feel like we're getting a little bit deeper in, outside of the standard principle, don't yell at people and things like that. I mean, I think those things are necessary and just as important, but perhaps don't drive down in depth on, why it happens and so forth. And we talked last week about, and it was something that, really stirred a lot of people on the Nicaraguan call that I do on Monday nights. And it was one of those things. It's so odd because the things that really end up stirring them and we really end up leaning into are certainly principles that I've trained in and of themselves in the past. But it always comes up as I'm making another point. And the thing that came up this last time was, somebody said success, and the way they say it is success. And I said, well, it really depends on what your definition of success is. And I could see through the Zoom, it's not a wonderful picture, but I could definitely see some people's head turn. A few guys got on the edge of their seat. And I looked at Alberto and I said, I think we touched on something. Before, it's like you got to know, if you're going somewhere, you have to know where you're going, right? And if you were to call me up and you were to say, hey, how do I get to your house? The first question I'm going to ask you is what? Where are you? So the first thing we have to do is understand where we are. But the second thing we have to do is understand what does success look like? Now, listen, I think when I say that, it's certainly in my mind's eye or in the picture of my mind, I think of it holistically. But that's not what this means. I mean, it is, but that's not only what this means. What does a successful relationship look like with you and a person, friend, family, child, parent? What does a successful morning look like? What does successful health look like? What does successful activity look like? And I think it could get pretty convoluted when you start really microing down that way. So I always like to macro out. It's like, well, what is the best version of me? And we're going to get into a little bit about emotions and how that might lead us. And I think we've touched on this in the past, but what I think today, and we did it last week a little bit, examine the results that we're looking to achieve, right? So from a macro level, identify where we want to go. Now, I've used this. My story is the only thing I got going for me right now as far as credibility. And for me, when we were building this business, I didn't have, and man, I saw, how God magnetizes things in the world to your thought process. And he certainly did this. And I saw several people in interviews talking about this very thing. Hold on just a second. I think someone's trying to get in and out, but I'll keep an eye on it. Who was it? Man, I forget the celebrity. Oh man, I forget who it was, but they said it wasn't, it was about Prince. It was a documentary about Prince. And they showed an interview of him, and Prince, obviously, you guys know, or may or may not know, was so dedicated to music. He just played everything and put an album out a year. I mean, he was really different. And he said that the reason he played music wasn't for, the money and the girls. If you know Prince, he was very pro-sexual. And he said it came with it, but that's not why I was doing music every day. So for me, it wasn't money, it wasn't a house, it wasn't jewelry, it wasn't, having a great big, well, we don't have a great big staff, but a great staff. I didn't even really see that far down. My two things were success to me was living life at my own pace, because a lot of times I'm faster than life is, and a lot of times I want to be slower than life is. I'm not a sheep. I don't like being herded. I don't like doing things because other people are doing them. Now, if it's right for me and other people are doing them, I join in, but that's not the reason I would do it. So the picture of success typically has to be something other than those material things. Now, they can be a part of the dream board, right? And I'm not saying that that's wrong. The challenge is, like, if it's a big, beautiful house, then that also means security, right? So again, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all motivated by different things. I've seen people, with beautiful dreams. My dad, for example, when I was growing up, he had a picture of, if you guys remember the Volvo S80, when it first came out, man, that thing was bad. It was ahead of its time on its curves. I remember he got stopped. The moral of the story is he made his screensaver that car. And he told me, he said, because I'm looking at it every day, I'm going to get that car. And sure enough, he did. And it was a cool car. He got compliments on it all the time. People would stop and go, man, that thing's amazing. And so those pictures help. So if it is the house, if you're, if one of the things that's going to make you happy is this, perfect car that you want, man, put it up there, picture it, see your destination, right? If it's something more organic like mine, then I had it written. One of them was walking through life at my own pace. And the second thing was, and you guys, the people who are on here, they know this, that I wanted to establish my own value. My previous employer gave me a pretty decent value. It was flattering, but it could have been better than what my real value was. It could have been a lot lower than what my real value was, but I wanted to know what that was. And so anyway, as we sit and we identify what success is, we need to understand that identification is a completely individual endeavor. It does, and I'm not trying to say that we're not influenced by the association. You guys know how powerful I think that is. What I'm saying is that when we think of a dream, we think of a success. First of all, the success cannot be a landing area. It's like you can't say, well, once I make 100 grand, I'm going to be, I'm going to be at peace. I'm going to at least feel better about things. It's just not true. Once I get to this job, there will be a novelty if you get the job, right? We all feel that, but that goes away. That's why there has to be a good, clear identification of where we're going looks like. Because if I'm working, because like one of my motivations for working and really accumulating and hunting and gathering right now is not for me. I mean, I have a car that I love. I'll probably drive it till the wheels fall off. The house is great. Stacy's got a car she loves. She drives like 9 miles a week in it. From here and home is like 5 minutes. So I'm not looking to gather for myself. I want to make sure that Catherine and James' school's taken care of. I want to make sure that, our retirement has decent money. And that's my motivation right now. It's not identifying self-worth. It's not, setting life at my own pace. I'm already there. But what the point is, once you get there, there's something else you want. There's another place to go if you're always growing and developing. And you guys know that I have asked this question before. No one has a great answer on, give me an example of something that is living, plant, animal, I don't care, humans that are in a state where they're not either growing or dying. There's just no stagnation in life. You're either growing or dying. And, the ultimate skeptic would say the minute we're born, we begin our death process. I'm not that skeptical. I believe that it has nothing to do with the prospect of a death cycle. I believe, and I've actually taught this and preached this, that age has nothing to do with growth. Age has nothing to do with growth. I mean, I know, and I'm not even kidding you, I know 80 and 90. In fact, one lady just passed away at 99. Last time I served in church with her was about 3 years ago. So she was 96. And she was as active as any person physically. Conversely, I know another lady just passed, same church, was homebound. But man, I never met a greater prayer warrior in my life. That's what she could do. So that's what she did do. And she was always growing spiritually. So when I say growing and dying, I don't mean that point where, I'm turning 50 this year. I don't mean that. I feel like that if there's a death cycle like that began there, the back nine has just begun. So that's not what I'm talking about. And I embrace it, by the way. I lean into my aging.
Careful, Matthew. Tread lightly. Careful.
Yeah, right. Be careful what you.
Some of us are older than you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Hey, I'm turning 52, so I'm right with you.
always.
I got y'all both beat, so hush it up.
I'm not going to tell
Wait, is everybody on the line on the back nine? Is that the problem here?
my waitress.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'll tell you what, if we don't govern ourselves, I believe that is true. I mean, all seriousness, that especially like our health. I mean, golly, I was in the insurance business, man. I tell you who's a great example. My dad at 50 wasn't as active as my father-in-law is at 71. It is what it is. I mean, so anyway, we won't get into all that. I'll thank you, Dana. I'm going to take your nudge, and I'm going to move off this topic and keep going. So then we talked last week about if we know what success is from a macro level and certainly from a micro level, right? I mean, if I'm walking into a store and I want them, the ultimate success is, man, I sure would love for them to carry my products. What's the immediate goal? Well, if we follow what we're learning, the immediate goal isn't to go in there and share the 6 reasons why we're different and equality and all that. The immediate goal is to go learn about this person, build a relationship, talk less than they do, ask great questions, really listen, and then find common ground, find a solution that they're looking for, a problem that they need solved, and a solution. And then we get into today on how do you, and we've talked about it, right? What makes us less attractive and more attractive in our communication with people. That's all in this book. And I'm aware that a lot of people that may jump on this, we had like 16 last do go live, this, more watch it, may not have the book. So, but the principles are simple. What I think the book does really well is gives us practical examples on, it's like, hey, be friendly and nice as you're asking for something. It's like, well, how do we do that? Well, he gives, granted, they're aged, but no less great examples of how to actually pragmatically work through dealing with people. The last one was, if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. If you think someone's wrong and you disagree with them, does it really matter? And if you think someone's wrong, there's really no great outcome in proving or trying to tell somebody they're wrong. It just puts us on the wrong side of human condition, right? When somebody tells you wrong, the first thing you do is you perk up in a defensive mechanism. So this furthers that, and it's called a drop of honey. And I think it's that old adage. He uses an older one in here. Excuse me. Allergies, man. He uses an older analogy, but I think that it's like if you attract more bees with honey than you do vinegar. I don't know if I ever liked that one because why would I want to attract a bee? I mean, Stacy's allergic. If she's with me and we're attracting bees, it's like, where's the hospital? I mean, she can really. So anyway, you understand. So here it said an older version of it, but it really doesn't matter. What I would like to do is do a little more reading, and I'm not talking about a scroll. Y'all usually know I read a sentence or two. I want to read a couple of paragraphs today, which is not voluminous and by any means, but a little different than what we normally do. And that's because, for those that don't have the book, because I think that these few paragraphs really summarize what this chapter is all about. But not only this chapter, but obviously it overlaps with a lot of other stuff that we've talked about. So this chapter talks about behavior that is much more likely to help us get a result or success that we're looking for. And my notes here said this is the Cliff Notes version of the chapter. I've got 2 little paragraphs I want to read. Before I do, any errors, omissions, cares, concerns? Okay. All right. This is the first one. It was, who is the guy? All right. Will your belligerent tones, your hostile attitude, make it easy for him or her to agree with you? If you come at me with fists doubled, I can promise you that mine will double as fast as yours. But if you come to me and you say, let us sit down and take counsel together, and if we differ from each other, understand why it is that we differ, just what the points of issue are, we will presently find that we are not so far apart after all, that we agree on many and blah, blah, blah. The point is, if we go to someone with an anger, an edge, a vigor, a frustration, there is a predictable response. And the predictable response is a defensive wall. It's either going to be a defensive wall or it's going to be an aggressive posture. Neither are permeable to ideas. Neither are permeable to sincere thought. Emotion and pragmatism have a hard time playing well with one another. So when you have two people, like he says, if we're willing to differ on and just what the points are, we will presently find that we are not far apart at all, that the points on which we differ are few and the points on which we agree are many. And if we have the patience and the candor and the desire to get together, then we will. It happened to me. Stacy and I, this is probably 4 houses ago. This is many years ago. We had a referral here in Pinellas County that was a realtor, and he helped us find our home. And then he also just started a mortgage brokerage, side business. Great idea. So we did our mortgage, he got his perspective of good faith lending and did all that through him. And then I decided, well, we're banking with Wells Fargo. I'll go to the bank. And the bank obviously was a lot better. I don't know if it's the same now, but back then the market was where, brokers couldn't give as good a deal as banks could. So I called him. And I remember I was in a car. I was with Stacy. We were driving to dinner, and he was in a car with his in-laws and his mom. Because he told me, he goes, hey, I'm in my car with my in-laws, my mom. And I go, hey, Peter, I just want to let you know real quick. I know it's, Friday at 4:30, but we're just going to go ahead and go with Wells Fargo. The terms and the, terms and conditions are a lot better. And you could hear him as a Greek dude. And, Greek, I don't mean to, the Greeks I know have a hearty temper, and they're very, manly men. And he is very much so. And he started getting pissed off. And he said, you could run the risk of losing this home. Well, the lady was selling her house. Come to find out, and we didn't know it when we bought it from her. We started going to a church, and she was a member there, and her parents were like the original members there, and she grew up in that house. So we got to know her. So I told him, I said, Peter, we built a relationship with this seller. I don't think, if we got to push off closing for a couple of days. And he said something and rebutted. He was frustrated with me. And I literally said this, and this was years ago. One of the few times I think I got it right. I told him, I said, Peter, if there's two parties that earnestly want to get the same thing done, I figure there's a pretty good chance that they're going to find a way to get it done. This lady wants to sell her house. She knows I want to buy it. So I believe we'll get it done. I'm not worried about it, blowing the deal. And, he was just trying to cajole me, coerce me, fear me into doing the loan. Let me tell you, if Wells Fargo would have turned me down, I would have never gone back to that dude, ever. And he was a high school friend of my brother-in-law. I mean, old school St. Pete. There was no reason for him to do that. I was a hard, warm lead or referral. So that was a good example of how less so his behavior and me not ever wanting to do business with him again. And I never did. And we bought several houses here in Pinellas County, never used Peter again. I bring this up less so for that, but more so the principle that if you have two willing and able parties that are trying to accomplish something that is similar, then there's a way to do it. So if we know that that's, I think I see some heads shaking, and again, don't ever take my word for something. If you disagree or you want to investigate or you want to dig down deeper, I have no pride of authorship. I love the debate. You guys know that I do. But if we know that we have to have two willing and able parties, there has to be some symbiosis in our effort, because if we're both pushing against each other, there's not going to be any malleability. There's not going to be any movement. So if we know that that's true, then I think it's easier to identify when we're communicating, interacting with, or associating with someone who obviously doesn't have a desires that we do. Like with a husband and wife, I'll say with me and Stacy, when I'm discussing something that's bothering her or me, my goal is to figure it out. That's my only goal when I'm getting it right. So when the conversation starts going away to other things that irritate me, and I'm talking about me being on offense, I've caught myself and going, you know what, my mind's not even right. I'm talking about things that aren't even relevant to this. I think they might be relevant to my feelings associated with this, but I want to get something done. So I don't know if that makes sense. I do want to read one more thing, and then we'll kind of talk about, I'll round it up, and then we'll get out of here today. All right. Rockefeller, everybody knows who he is. He had some, I'm going to just set this up really quickly. He had some very, very disgruntled workers in the mine, in some of his mines. And they were, if it's on 136, if you want to read it, I won't give you the whole background. But basically, he shows up to these union heads and executive representatives. He's the CEO, so he represents the stockholders, and you'll hear that in here. But I want you to hear. So he's got this horrible place that he's going into. They're read through it. Like they were very angry with him before he shows up. And this is the speech that he gives, and the speech tells kind of the whole story. So I'll just read it. So Rockefeller begins to speak to all the people. This is a red letter day in my life. It is the first time I've ever had the good fortune to meet representatives of the employees of this great company, its officers and superintendents together, and I can assure you that I am proud to be here and that I shall remember this gathering as long as I live. Had this meeting been held 2 weeks ago, I should have stood here a stranger to most of you, recognizing a few faces. Having had the opportunity last week of visiting all the camps in the southern coal field and talking individually with practically all the representatives except those who were away, having visited in your homes with many of your wives and children, we meet here not as strangers but as friends. And in that spirit of mutual friendship, it is in that spirit of mutual friendship that I'm glad to have this opportunity to discuss with you our common interests. Since this is a meeting of officers of the company and representatives of the employees, it is only by your courtesy that I am here, for I am not so fortunate as to be either one or the other. And yet I feel that I am intimately associated with you men and women, for in a sense, I represent both the stockholders and directors. Isn't that and this is Carnegie, isn't that a superb example of the fine art of making friends out of enemies? What a beautifully written speech. But the tenets are simple, right? What stood out to me the most was our discussions about relationships, right? Everybody communicates, few connect, and how relationships are sacrifice and they take a lot of energy and effort. And so this guy goes out there a week prior and meets with everybody. He does the work. He got their permission through that activity, through that, the layers. We got positional leader, then you got permissional leader, then you got the results leader, right? So he goes and he sacrifices his time. He's a production leader, result/production leader, by going and producing, by creating relationships, by communicating with people in earnest, right? So then when he shows up, they give him permission. Now he's created this environment. He took he had the inclination, and he took the time to create this environment where there was two parties that had a similar vision of where they wanted to go. And he summed it up. I mean, there's a couple things here that he even mentions. His speech was radiant with such phrases as, I am proud to be here, having visited in your homes, met with many of your wives and children. We meet here not as strangers, but as friends, spirits of mutual friendship, common interest. Those phrases and words have power. Any questions, comments, errors, additions, cares, concerns? If anybody's bored, raise your hand now. We can certainly switch gears at any time. I'm that versatile. All right, let Sarah's bored. She's gone. But that's all right. I keep track. I know where I asked somebody where you are. Okay, so this is the second. That was just a beautiful letter, but I'm going to read this last one and we get into it. I know I'm kind of teasing you, like I got two and I really have three. If a man's heart is rankling with discord and ill feeling toward you, you can't win him to your way of thinking with all the logic of a Christendom. I don't know what that word is. I imagine it's somebody smart. Scolding parents and domineering bosses and husbands and nagging wives ought to realize that people don't want to change their minds. They can't be forced or driven to agree with you or me, but they may be possibly led to if we are gentle and friendly, ever so gentle and friendly. So that's the premise of this. We talked about if we disagree with somebody, does it really matter? If it really matters, and we talked about reasons why it would matter, there certainly are times that it matters. How do we approach that person to get where we want to go to find success in that communication? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. So what would your response be if one of you guys says, hey, Matthew, I know you said this, but I think that. And I raised my voice and I got agitated and I insulted your intelligence. Would you then be in a position to hear what I had to say? No, nobody would. But it happens all the time. You know what we're kind of into? We used to watch The Idol. You remember American Idol? And the kids were younger and it was just good family time. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie. You know, I'm not going to try to be macho and be like, well, the kid. I thought it was really good. I'm a big Seacrest fan. I thought he was awesome. But it was a neat time because we loved it. We liked hearing him sing, and then we would talk and, you know, who do you think's going to win? It was just good family time. It might as well have been a board game. Well, the one we have now is Survivor. So if you have Prime Video, you can binge watch Survivor from now till March of 2022. I mean, it's just like, I didn't know they had 888 seasons. So anyway, we're watching this and you ought to see how people respond. This one guy's there. He's a Marine, 2 tours in Iraq. And he ended up being the softest dude out there. I'm sorry to say, I love our men and women of the forces, but this guy didn't give him a good look. And every time he disagreed with somebody, he just raised his hands and he was a big dude. So if you know Survivor, he was worth keeping earlier because he helps you with your challenges. If you don't know it, don't worry about it. He was valuable. And a couple people, I mean, he brought the whole camp down. He made everybody stressed. He was a very angry dude. He was very lazy. He didn't do anything. And I had already read this chapter and I'm thinking to myself, that dude, no matter how valuable he's going to be, is going to get kicked off. And sure enough, next week, man, everybody's like, look, he'd be great. We could use this guy, but I can't sleep at night. I got to get rid of this dude. So I think if we stop it, when I read through this stuff, and like I said, I've read this book before, and there's so many other books that have these same principles written in different ways. It seems so logical. But then I think about how many times somebody's disagreed with me and I've gotten angry. I've worked on this for years, and it's hard to get me angry now. And I'll tell you why here in a minute. Like I said, everything can be developed.
Can I chime in there for a second, Matt?
Not if you're going to get angry at me.
Oh, man. No. But just so I don't lose train of thought here, what you're talking about. A prime example actually would be my wife. Okay, because we fit that book where opposites attract. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, I mean, even just people in general, marriage, I mean, if you look at that and apply those terms, because as a marriage, me and my wife, we don't agree on a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we need to take it to another level either.
Yeah.
You know, so those should just, like you say, apply to everybody. And, you know, we are entitled to our opinions, but getting mad never solves anything.
Well, let me skip down here. I want to continue to talk to you, but
sure.
Let me ask you this question, and I'll ask everybody, but since you're live with me now, you can be the first to answer. If anyone else wants to, they can. Why do you think, so I'm thinking of Stacy, you're thinking of your spouse.
Sure.
What? We talked about last week, you know, what arguments really matter. I mean, does where we squeeze the toothpaste tube really matter, right? That kind of argument. So let's assume that it's something that's worth something, that it does matter. You have an opinion, I have an opinion, or your spouse does, and they differ, and I get angry. Why? What are some of the reasons that I would get angry for someone not agreeing that the toilet paper should lay over and not the other way? And by the way, for those of you who are not lacing your toilet paper to lay over, you're doing it wrong. You're wrong. You want to hear what I have to say about it? You're like, nope. I don't hear nothing from you. You just called me wrong.
Well, we
Beatrice
always want to
looking
think
at me
that.
funny. So Beatrice, it either hangs out the back, like on the wall, or it lays over the front. So you can just, you know what I mean? Hangs over the back and it gets stuck to it. I gotta fan it like hard.
I'm gonna check my
loops out and then I grab it. Because it's dark. You can't feel it in the dark. You just gotta slap it on one side, it'll loop up. All right, go ahead, Glenn. Man, my ADD. Go ahead, buddy.
No, it's just one of those things, as a married couple, just because you don't agree, like you were asking me how to put that into perspective, like how do you something big, but how I'm gonna try to word this.
Usually with me, it's value system.
You want see, because what you're saying is you want people. Why do we do what we do? Is because we want people to say we want to think that our reasons are right.
Right.
The way we think the way to do something is right, but there's always 10 ways to do something. So like when you just because you don't agree something, like my wife would say, in the beginning of our marriage, you just got to step back and look at it from her point of view.
Right.
Look at it from the other person. If you're coming in as a salesman and you're looking at it and you're looking at that potential client or that, you want that wholesale, right? And that's what I've been learning with my experience is first of all, you don't want to scare them away. Be who you are. And you'll get through that, but don't. What's the words I'm trying to say is that just because they might have a different view on certain products or the way you're coming about, don't take that wrong. But you can always come together in understanding what you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Totally. So I would agree with you. With me, Stacy and I, she's 5'1", I'm 6'1". She's light hair, I'm dark hair. As physically different as we look, she's pretty, I'm not. As different as we look is as different as we are. However, we are very, very, very equally aligned on the things that really matter. We don't
absolutely.
We may have splinter conversations, but holistically, we agree on how we want to raise our children. We agree on the temperature and the stratosphere and atmosphere of our home. We agree financially, where
absolutely.
I'm a spender. She's the price checker. So there is some disagreement there, but as far as what money will produce, we don't covet it. We know we can make more of it. So we're in that way, the way we think about finances is equally yoked. Now, it may not have always been, but I'm going to trail a thought pattern here. If leadership is influence, which I've always told you, boiled down to its finest essence, I believe that is the definition of leadership, is influence. If that's true, and we know to find success, no matter how we define that, we've said in this training so many times, and I live my life by it, that if we want something, if we want to go somewhere, we have to help others get what they want first. We have to help others get what they want first. And the obvious example is employee-employer relationship. The employer wants your time. Once you give it to him, give him what he wants, we get what we want. And I'm putting somebody in here right quick. We get what we want, which is money. So if we know that those principles are true, when
take care of the people who take care of you.
Well,
that's basically
leadership is service, right? Because so take that definition. If I'm helping this person, any person, accomplish or get what they want, by definition, I'm serving them.
Absolutely.
So I had the blessing of serving for many years as a deacon of a previous church of mine. And when I say deacon, does everybody here think of leader? If someone doesn't, that's okay. I don't think it's wrong. I just think everybody thinks it is, right? It's a leadership position. Do you know what the word deacon means? Does anybody? Somebody might. So the word deacon comes from the Greek derivation of a word called doukinos. Doukinos means servant. Leadership is serving, right? In our faith, my Savior was the greatest leader of all, and man, he was a servant leader. So when we get angry with somebody because they disagree with us, why do we do that? I mean, if we know leadership is service, if we know to get where we want to go, we have to serve others and help them get where they want to go. So if we get angry, if we get belligerent, what do we think we're going to accomplish? That's an honest question that you need and I need to answer for ourselves. When someone challenges my faith, why did I, and I don't anymore, I really don't, why did I used to just get so angry? And it was because I took it personal. It's because I honestly, for me, and again, I've told you guys this 1,000 times, I can draw almost any problem down to a way we see ourselves, a self-worth issue. And I don't mean black or white. Oh, they have good, they have bad. I mean, there's a lot of different levels of issues that we might have with the way we see ourselves. Or even more importantly, self-esteem is not what we think of ourselves. Self-esteem is not what others think of us. Self-esteem is what we think other people think about us. And I believe that when we serve truths and find out who we really are, and we learn who we truthfully really are and build our self-worth, then we're able to remove our personal narcissistic, selfish. We've talked about the human condition. There's a reason when we look at a group photo, we look for whose face do you look for first? We are narcissists. It's just who we are. Some are less than others, both for nature, for nurture, for association, for growth and development. But you have people who do not attend to any of that, associate with wrong people, and you'll see the anomalia in the selfish nature of human beings in grotesque forms, is the only way I can say it. We see it in micro, what do they call them? Oh my gosh, micro cuts or whatever. I forget what it's called, microaggressions. We see them in microaggressions. Why is it that if I like the Gators, I got to hate the Seminoles? I don't understand that. It's never made sense to me. And I was a huge Gator fan, but I also had buddies that were in Florida State. It never made sense to me. It's like, why do I get mad because you don't like my team? Or when, kids, right? I wonder how many arguments were had over who was cooler, Superman or Batman. I don't know how you could be anything other than Superman. Batman's like a real dude. He just had money. But that does make him cooler too, because he really didn't have a superpower. He was like a normal dude who was able to run with superheroes, right? So when we think about it and think about ourselves as kids, how many arguments these kids get into? Thankfully, James's friend group is maturing pretty quickly. They're good kids, and they're not having those arguments anymore. Just stupid stuff. Like, oh, we got there on Tuesday. No, it was on Wednesday, not Tuesday. And it's like, does it matter? Does it have anything to do with the point of your story? No. So anyway, I just think it's easy as we've reflected on ourselves as children on why we do that. Why if someone disagrees with us, do we get mad? I do it too. Listen, I'm preaching to both of us here. But if you think about it pragmatically, and we think about some of the times you've blown up recently or done something you didn't do, if we could have just stopped. And I'm telling you, if you're reading this stuff, you're here, you're associating, I'm associating with you with me, with people of like kind and interests that really care about people and the human condition and how do we really navigate through life without, doing some of this bonehead stuff that we do. Think about the last time you blew up at somebody. Were you serving them or were you serving yourself?
Matt?
I'm telling you. Yes, Beatrice.
I think what you're saying is so real. A lot of times when people get angry, when I get angry, it's really not about the other person. It's about me. It's about my own insecurities, my own pain, because hurting people hurt people. And it's also about wanting to control. And when we can't control, we feel our self-worth gets even worse. That's a good term. But a lot of time it has nothing to do with us. Just like you were saying, Glenn, I went into an account and the guy was so rude to me. I'm just trying to see if he wanted to carry some CBD coffee. And he was so rude. And at first I got a little upset. I said, why is he so rude to me? And then it dawned on me, I'm not going to get him to sell any coffee if I confront him. So I was so nice to him. And he just really looked like an idiot, which he was. But I left out of there. I know I was not going to get a sale, but it had nothing to do with me. He was just an angry person who had a bad day.
Absolutely.
So I think our philosophy is you be kind to people. And at some point you realize that maybe this is not the sell for me. Let me move on to another account.
We used to say
Exactly.
We used to say all the time. Now this is only going to affect some people, but with my faith, the sale, I mean, it would be pretty naive to think that maybe that's the only reason I showed up. Maybe you smiling at the guy, maybe that's what your role was right there. And we could have a whole long talk about the expectation of the value of something. Remember I told you I worked for that restaurant where they were working me 80, 90 hours a week, and I don't use those terms. I mean, you show up at night, you leave at night. 80, 90 hours a week. And I was talking to my dad, and I was like, they're killing me. And he goes, man, you're getting up. He said, yeah, but think about it this way. He goes, they're building in you a work ethic that no one will ever take from you. And so my goal, my role there, my value in that year and 2 months wasn't money. It wasn't restaurant experience as much as it was work ethic training. And that work ethic did sustain me my entire life, except when it came to like going to school when I was supposed to. But other than that, if I'm working. So if we talk about getting angry, and Beatrice, you bring up an amazing point that it's always about us. I'm going to present an idea that I have done so in several circles, and it always conjures really good thought. I'm going to present it in a little bit different manner than I have in the past. I was with a guy, Tom Smith, years ago, Christian psychologist, really, really bright guy. And we meet once a month. And man, I just love talking to him. And he loved talking to me. It was high, in our opinion, it was high level talks, but who knows? But anyway, Tom said one day, and I've come to the conclusion I don't agree with what he said, but it did start me, and this is 20 something years ago, it did start me a mental, Chad or dog ear, where I over the years, I've always kind of come back and really dabbled with his thought process. And what he said was, and it took me a few years to understand I didn't agree with him. I knew right away it was important to me, but I knew I didn't know if I agreed with him. And they said, anger is not an emotion. Anger is not an emotion. And it angered me when so I have amended that. I believe anger is an emotion, and it's really not relevant to the conversation. The real thing is that anger is a secondary emotion. Think about that for a minute. Anger is a secondary emotion. Now, here are some of the things that I want to throw and submit for your own thinking. Emotions like pain. When I stub my toe at night, I literally get angry. Like now, not everybody does, but I'm not just talking about physical pain. I'm talking about emotional pain. What happens when someone broke your heart? First thing I'm sad, but I'm pissed, I'm mad. It's like anger comes from pain. How about fear? Fear of loss, fear of the dark, right? But fear, right? Fear of losing. Think about, fear of losing your security, right? We have a spouse that, like we talked a little bit about alcoholism. What if we have a spouse that's alcoholic? Why is it? And I'll go back to that dog whisperer I saw where the dog's tearing up the house, and I'm thinking, man, I'd kill that damn dog. And they pan over to the owner, and the owner's crying, the young lady. And he says, why are you crying? And she said, she said, because I can't imagine the chaos that's going on in his little mind and spirit to create the destruction that he's creating now. Yet, what is our natural reaction when a spouse and I know it's hard. Maybe not even from the spouse's perspective. Maybe it's from the best friend's perspective. When you have a best friend who's destroying their life. I had a good friend of mine who, he pretty much tore everything up on a divorce. I think I told you a little bit about him. And to this day, I think I'm the only friend he retained from that, because I knew that my friend Bill was hurting. I knew that he was hurting his spouse and his kids, all of which I had a good relationship with. And I didn't abandon him. And I did get angry with him once. And I think I've told you the story. I had a pastor that I used to meet with once a week. He was the pastor of my children's private school when they were in elementary. And his name was Paul. And I told Paul about Bill, and I told him, I said, I'm getting ready to write the dude off. And he looked back and he goes, because I was pissed. I was like, man, he's just doing some crazy stuff. And he looked at me and said, you can't do that, Pitts. And I said, why not, Paul? And he said, because if not you, then who? If you're not going to love him and show him that someone cares about him, and in our conversation, showed the love of Jesus, who do you know someone else will do that? And I said, no. And he goes, then you have to. And I said, gladly. And it's like, it just changed in fact, I cry right now. It just changed my perspective. And then that association in that moment, I did feel bad for Bill, and it just, the feeling bad just kind of kept going down as he kept doing crazy crap. And then it turned to anger. Right. And why was I angry with him? Because my feelings were hurt for his loved ones. I actually asked him not to. I told him, I said, if you got to go, man. I'm pro family, but I'm going to love you. Just if you leave, don't tear everything up on the way out. He did the exact opposite. So I think part of it was like, he's my best friend. He didn't listen to me. What is it? Do I not matter to him? Does my, all that crap I think I went through to get to that point where I mentioned it to Paul. And I'm so thankful that we had that moment, because that it not only was, I wasn't like, all right, Paul, I'll go out and do it, but begrudgingly. It was like that moment I became the owner of that dog. That moment I stopped looking at the destruction and I started looking at what might be causing that. And that's what you just embodied, Beatrice. You recognize that you're not the cause of that anger. You're not the cause of that belligerence or whatever you were confronted with that day. And I think if we can get better at doing that and pausing for a moment and analyzing, I mean, I know it's easy with email and written. I live by this law, and I know you guys have heard it, and yet probably few people have exercised it. I did it only because one of the men in my life that meant the most to me and I admired and respected the most asked me to do it. So I did, and it saved me a ton of times. I wish there was a verbal way to do it. That's what I'm getting at. So handwritten or email, if you have something to say, and if you think I'm going to call this person, I'm going to tell them, I would advise you bash that person in this email. You bash that person, writing it, if that's what you do. Get it out on paper. And then 24 hours later, read it again. And if you want to send it, send it. I have done it 7 times in my life. I haven't done it in years, but I did it a lot when I was a younger, more volatile guy. And I never sent one, guys. I never sent one. I never, in fact, every time I read it, I go, praise God for Poppy giving me this one little tool of advice, because man, if I'd have sent that, it'd have been bad. All right. So that's about all I got. Like I said, I believe it's a secondary emotion. Some of it's fear. What I put, this isn't in the book. I just kind of was thinking of, because like I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Pain, physical and emotional, fear, humiliation, frustration, grief, right? So I guess it all really boils down to getting focus off of self and try to put it on someone else. And if that someone else takes that focus, balls it up, and throws it back in our face, let's take a moment and analyze what is the emotion that's going to get us where we want to go. And I would say this, Beatrice, in a perfect case scenario, I would have reacted the way you did, and I'm an A type, so that's a tough environment for me, that automatic, like real quick. I'm good at email. Like I can analyze it, but when I'm a counterpuncher, and I'm an egotistical alpha male with low self-esteem. And so when someone says something like that, my first reaction is not the right reaction. So over the years, I've gotten a lot better at it. And one of the things, so I would have done first what you did, and then if I'm getting it perfect with the training that I've done, it'd be like, all right, let's be a blessing to this guy on the way out. Let's find something to compliment in his store. Maybe he's wearing a bow tie that looks bad to the bone, man. Something honest, right? It has to be honest. It can't be some dirty crap store. Hey, I love your store, But find some way, maybe just flash a smile, some way. But I tell you one thing that I started using, and it wasn't in a sale environment, but more like at a 7-Eleven, or if you're at a cashier, if you're at a Dillard's or something, and somebody's being curt or short with me, I literally, and this works, this is free, guys, and it works. I've never had, now I've not used it hundreds of times, so I don't have a ton of data, but I've never used this and it not work perfectly. You doing okay today? You doing okay today? You having a bad day today? Anything like that? You doing all right today? They will, yes, why? I mean, it immediately changes them. Now, there's exceptions to every rule. Like I said, I haven't used it 100 times. So I hope the first time you do it, be like, what the hell is it to you? Like, you know what? I was just concerned about you. you looked like you were miserable. So I thought I'd brighten your day up.
I think that's a good idea, Matt. I wish I had. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I didn't think of it. What I did do, he had some really good fresh ginger, and I bought a package of ginger from him when I left, and I know he felt so bad.
Patronized him as a customer. That is dope. So that waitress. So I had a friend of mine who said, and I think you might know this because we've done a lot of these together, you and me. But he told me, he said, Matthew, he said, when you're debating somebody or when someone comes at you verbally, have you ever had like seen or been in a fight where somebody runs at somebody and they kind of move and they matador them and they use their own weight against them? That's kind of what you did. That's kind of what I do. I don't get mad and angry anymore as I'm getting older, but I'll be like passive aggressive. And that's kind of my thing. Like, you having a bad day? It's kind of a jab, but it's not meant to be. And it never has been. So I know you buying fresh ginger was like, you'll use it. It's not a jab, but it's still kind of that, there you go, take your energy and get on by me. That might be it. We'll cut that part out. That's not great training. All right, that's all I got. I mean, I got a few other things, but I think we hit on a lot of good stuff today. It's really, to me, I mean, I know for some of you maybe here every week, maybe you see it really coming together on a long string of, okay, now it's this to this, this to this, right? We got to make relationships. We got to make it about other people. We got to ask them and find out where they want to go. We got to help them get where they want to go. We got to make sure that, so it's all, to me, that's one of the reasons why I like this book, because each chapter is really only one principle. It's just a ton of practical ways that principle was being used in history with real people. So anyway, anybody got any comments, cares, concerns, errors, additions?
Hey, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, Dana.
I just wanted to say thanks. I'm going to have to pop off because we lost power about 45 minutes ago from the ice storm, and I need to go find out what's going on, and I need to save the battery on my phone just in case.
All right, hon.
All right,
We're all
stay safe.
Thank you for hanging in
Thanks,
there,
guys.
Dana.